Board and to share screen. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining. It's Rabbi Akiva Males. Today is Wednesday, February 24th. We're getting ready for Purim. Purim is just a couple days away. I wanted to share with you, even though it's Parshas Tetzaveh, I wanted to share than something on the Parsha this week. I wanted to share with you something on Megillas Esther, because you can never have too many Divrei Torah on Megillas Esther, especially when Purim is right around the corner. Let's start by, I want to share something with you from Rav David Cohen, and let me tell you how this evolved. The other week, I was surprised. I saw in an email, I saw on a website, rather, a Jewish website, a request to say Tehillim for Rabbi David Cohen. Rabbi David Cohen is a real Talmud Chacham. He's a great Torah giant. He lives in Brooklyn, New York, and in the Flatbush section of Brooklyn, not far from my in-laws. And Rav David Cohen apparently was hospitalized on February 16th. I've heard since he's out of the hospital, but I haven't heard much else. And Rav David Cohen is a rabbi of a shul. The shul in Flatbush in Brooklyn is called Gvul Yavetz. And his phone rings off the hook throughout the day, people calling him from around the world with halachic questions. He's seen as someone who really has broad shoulders and takes responsibility for answering some very, very serious halachic questions that come up. And he's also, as I said, a huge Talmud Chacham. He's written a lot of Sfarim. So I saw at the end of the item, it says his name for Tehillim. And it's David ben Esther Malka. So I immediately said, I'm going to daven for Refuah Shalema for Rabbi Cohen, for David ben Esther Malka. And I think the Torah learning that we're going to do this morning should be a refuah shalema for him as well. But now let me tell you how this evolved. I have a little bit of a relationship with Rav David Cohen, and this goes back over 20 years or so. Before I was married, I had attended a number of his shiurim in Brooklyn. If I had been at a friend's house for an out Shabbos, and I saw that, wow, he's got a real encyclopedic knowledge, and he's got a command of some sources that are sometimes off the beaten track that some people may not know. So when I was in yeshiva, even before I was married, if I was learning something and I was researching a topic, whether it was halachic, Torah topic, whatever it was, and I said, wow, I hit a roadblock, never seen anything on this before, I would send a letter to Rabbi Cohen in Brooklyn and say, okay, my name is Males, Akiva Males, I'm in Queens, New York, I'm learning in yeshiva. I wanted to know, has Rabbi ever seen something on this? This is something that's got me stumped. And he was always so kind, always wrote back to me, but I'd never really met him personally. And then after I got married, I remembered something that one of my teachers in yeshiva in Israel had told us. He said, Purim is an incredible opportunity for numerous reasons, but one reason specifically. There are people who throughout the year, it is very hard to get an appointment with. They have very busy schedules. You got to get in touch with their secretary or whatnot. But on Purim, pretty much everyone has an open door policy. They're home and their doors are open. Jews I'm talking about, that they're home, their doors are open, and you can bring them mishloach manos. So Purim, rather than just being a day to just goof around with your friends, that's a day that you should really maximize to see who can you get to see, who can you get an in with, and say shalom aleichem to some great Torah personalities who you might not have access to during the rest of the year. So I thought about that right after I was married, and I was at my in-laws with Layla 1 year in Brooklyn. It was probably the first or second year that we were married. And I said, okay, I'm in touch regularly with Rav David Cohen. Let me bring him Mishloach Manos, and I'll go meet him and say good Yantav, wish him a good Purim. And also Rabbi Yisrael Reisman, it was that same Purim. Layla did the driving. You know, I had already had a cup of wine or something like that. So Layla did the driving, and we went to stop at Rav David Cohen's house, and also Rabbi Reisman. I got a very, very warm welcome from both of them. But here's what happened with Rav David Cohen. When I went in there, I introduced myself. I said, I'm Akiva Males. I'm the guy in Queens. I sent you the letter. So both him and his wife, they were so happy to finally put a name to the face. And Rabbi Cohen shared a Divrei Torah with me or so on Purim. And then he also gave me a whole bunch of his Sfarim. He's written a number of Sfarim over the years, and he gave me a bunch of them. And one of them is all about Purim. I'm holding it up right here, and it's called Sefer Esther Hamalka. So I had an instant flashback when I'm looking at this name for Tehillim, that his name is David ben Esther Malka. His mother's name was Esther Malka. Then I thought about the Sefer he gave me on Purim that's called Sefer Esther Hamalka. And I said to myself, I bet you that must have been named after his mother. So I immediately, I went home. Maybe I did this last Shabbos actually, and I looked up at the beginning of the Sefer where he talks about why he named it Esther Malka. Esther Hamalka, and sure enough, he named the Sefer after his mother as a memorial to his dear mother. I don't know how long ago she passed, but he wrote the Sefer. He called it Esther Hamalka in memory of his mother, Esther Malka. And then he wrote something fascinating in the introduction. He said, why did his grandparents name her Esther Malka? Well, what day in the Jewish calendar do you think she was born? She was born on Purim. So because she was born on Purim, her parents named her Esther Malka. But it gets better. When on Purim was she born? He writes in his introduction that his mother was born, not only was she born on Purim, she was born while they were reading Megillas Esther. So since she was born on Purim and while they were reading Megillas Esther, that's why her parents named her Esther Malka, and that's why he named his Sefer on Purim. He decided to call it Esther Hamalka. So having said all that, here's a picture on page 1 of the title page from Sefer Esther Hamalka. And there you see on the right side, it clearly says that it was written by Rav David Cohen. And it says there that he's a rabbi of the shul called Gvul Yavetz in Brooklyn, and that's the Sefer. So I just thought that was so cool that's his name. So David ben Esther Malka, Hashem should bless him with a refuah shalema. His mother's neshama should have an aliyah. I just see someone commented there on the chat I thought this was very cool. And he named his Sefer Esther Hamalka because it's a memory to his mother. And he writes that his mother showered him with love, and he attributes much of his success in his Yiddishkeit and in his Torah study based on his mother's love, her devotion, and her self-sacrifice to the family. And that's why he named his Sefer on Purim Esther Hamalka. So it just made me think of that. So I want to share with you, as a zechus for Rabbi Cohen and for his mother, I want to share with you something amazing when I was looking through his Sefer on Shab. Oh, look at this. I didn't have to tell you. Here it is right here, the paragraph. Karasi Shema Sefer. I called this book Esther Hamalka al Shem Imi Morisi. So I put it in here. I didn't realize I had it right here. I named it after my mother, Esther Malka. Bas Levi Unachama Spector. Her name was Esther Malka, the daughter of Levi and Nechama Spector, Zichron Livracha. Shenolda B'Shas Kriyas HaMegillah. She was born during Kriyas HaMegillah. I don't know if that actually happened in Shul, that his grandmother went into labor, or if she was at home. B'Shnas Tafresh Nun, and that would have been Tafresh. So this would have been probably. Wow, that could have been like 1899. Okay. Bestavich, Ukraine. She was born in the Ukraine. Veniftera, she passed away. Yudtes Elo Tavshin Memalef, 1981, in New York. He goes, I wrote another sefer that I published in her memory. I described some of her great attributes. And she poured on my shoulders bundles of love. And basically, it's her love that she poured on my shoulders that I'm able to share with the Jewish people. So he attributes so much of his success and his learning and his Yiddishkeit to his mother, and that's why he named the Sefer after her. So let's learn something from that Sefer. I looked at it on Shabbos, and I saw something so cool, something so beautiful. It should be a zechus for Refuah Shalema for Rabbi Cohen, and it should be a zechus for his mother, Aleh Shalom. So let's see, this is in a section, it's page Nuntes in the Sefer, and it was in a section called Minhagim Shonim B'Purim. So what Rabbi Cohen did was he hunted down in some sources some little known Minhagim, not the major ones. Okay, we all know about costumes, Hamantashen, Grogers, we know those, but he hunted down some little known Minhagim that we may not have even been aware of. And he wanted to explain the deep significance, because if our ancestors started a minhag, if they started a custom, it didn't happen by chance. There's obviously some deep significance to it. And Rabbi Cohen wanted to come up with theories, what might be the significance of these various minhagim that he hunted down. And he brought down one here, number 3, Gimel. I had never heard of this before, but when I looked it up in my Shulchan Aruch, I saw it underlined when I was learning for Smicha. So this is in the halachas of Basar and Chalav, about mixing milk and meat. And it totally flew over my head. I didn't realize the significance of it, but Rabbi Cohen did. Look at this, Gimel. Achilas tarnagolim b'chalav shkedim. There was a minhag on Purim that people would eat tarnagolim, that's chicken or poultry, b'chalav shkedim, with almond milk. We all know almond milk is sold regularly. It's a dairy alternative. If let's say you've got a recipe that's calling for milk and you want to have a fleshik meal or you want to have a parv meal, if you're vegan, whatever it is, so you could always use, Layla does this all the time. She'll use almond milk as a substitute for regular milk. So there was a minhag that existed on Purim that people would have at their Purim Suda. They would have chicken or poultry that was cooked, that was made together with almond milk. What? Where could such a custom have come down from? So this is brought down in the Ramah. The Ramah, Rav Moshe Isserles, living in the 1500s in Poland, he brings us down that this was a minhag. And the reason the Ramah brings this down is he says there's no concern of maris ayin. We know that there's a halachic concept called maris ayin. We don't want to get people confused. We don't want to get people to think that I'm doing something wrong when I really have not. So Rav Moshe Isserles wrote, there's no issue of maris ayin about cooking, having chicken together with almond milk. Why? So he says, even though people might start to think, oh my gosh, you're having chicken and milk. So he says, there's no maris ayin. Why? The Ramah holds, because what's the prohibition of chicken and milk? It's not biblical. It's not midoraisa. It's midrabanan. It's only rabbinic. On a Torah level, I can't have beef and milk. But on a rabbinic level, on a Torah level, could I have poultry and milk? The Torah doesn't address that. It wouldn't be a problem. It was the Rabbanan, it was the rabbis who said you can't have poultry and milk because that'll get people confused and start having beef and milk. So therefore it's midrabanan. So the Ramah holds that if something is only usr midrabanan, is only prohibited on a rabbinic level, there's no issue of maris ayin. So therefore there was no problem having poultry with almond milk, and such a minhag existed on Purim. Then the Shach, that's the Sifsei Kohn, that's one of the primary commentators to the Shulchan Aruch. Rav Shabtai Kohn lived in Poland in the 1600s, so it's a few generations after the Ramah. He argues with the Ramah. So he says here, B'shach Yoredeya Pezayin Hevi a Marshal. He brings down the Marshal, Rav Shlomo earlier than the Shach. Shevi Aminag B'Purim. He says there was a custom on Purim. Shiragilin Lechol Tarnagolas B'Chalav Shkedim. They would eat a chicken that was made with almond milk. B'Chilek Ramah. He argues with the Ramah. And what did he say? That you can't, if you're going to do this, if you're going to have your chicken in almond milk, you can't just have it like that because that's maris ayin. People are going to get confused and think you're violating a rabbinic prohibition of having chicken and milk. So even on a rabbinic prohibition, you got to be concerned with maris ayin. So how do you get around it? Put some slivered almonds in there or put some almonds on the table when you serve it. Everyone will know, oh, that's a simon. That's a sign that this isn't real milk. This isn't dairy. It's just almond milk. It's almonds. It's not real dairy. So that's what the Marshal says. That's quoted by the Shach. They argue with the Ramah that they say that even on a rabbinic prohibition, there still is a concern of maris ayin. Therefore, on Purim, when you're having your chicken and almond milk, make certain that you put some almonds out there. The Ramah, because according to the Ramah, they're arguing with Kiva David Rabbanan, since it's only rabbinic, ain't sarach lenich shkedim, you don't got to put out the almonds. So it's fascinating. He's telling us that a minhag once existed, and it was widespread in Poland, that on Purim, people would specifically sit down and they're charting out their menu. If anyone has not yet charted out their menu for Friday, for the Seuda that you want to have on Friday for Purim, or even if you want to have on Shabbos, call it your Shushan Purim Seuda. So I looked it up. You can Google it online. There are many recipes out there for chicken and almond milk. And you could say, I'm fulfilling this ancient Jewish custom that has been all but forgotten, that was once very popular in Poland, and it created a huge machlokes. It created a debate between the Ramah and the Marshal and the Shach about, do I have to be concerned about maris ayin or not? Am I concerned with maris ayin? Or not? Do I have to put out almonds to let everyone know it's not real dairy or not? But once such a minhag once existed, and Rabbi Cohen wants to get to the bottom. Okay, forgetting that machlokas about if I have to be concerned about maris ayin or not, what was the basis for this minhag? Where did this come from? Why did our ancestors, of all the ways you can make chicken, why did they say on Purim, we're specifically going to have chicken baked in almond milk? Where did this come from? Where did this come from? So Rabbi Cohen has a beautiful theory, and I want to share it with you. And it's in the Sefer. And again, this should be a zechus for his refuah shalema, and should be a zechus for his mother. She should have zechusim too. So let's see. So let's second paragraph. Venira sheminag. Where did this custom come from? Nova. It's rooted, or it comes out of Medrash Tanchuma LeNoach. There's a famous Medrash that's in Parshas Noach. Shakadosh Baruch Hu kafa alein har kegigis lekabel Torah shebal peh. That when we were at Sinai, when we were at Har Sinai, and Hashem wanted us to accept the Torah, there's a famous rabbinic teaching, it's in the Gemara, it's in the Midrashim, that Kafale and Har Kegigis, God held the Mount Sinai over the Jewish people like a barrel. And he said, if you accept the Torah, it'll all be good. But if you don't, I'm going to drop this mountain on you and obliterate you. That's what the Gemara, that's what the famous rabbinic teaching is. And then the question is obvious. Why did Hashem need to do that? We already said Na'aseh v'nishma. The Jewish people already said Na'aseh v'nishma, that we accept the Torah, we want the Torah. Why did Hashem have to be kofalei and har kegigis? Why did he have to hold it and threaten us like that? So one of the answers that's out there is when we said that we accept the Torah, that was talking about the Dioraisas. We never said anything about all the Dirabbanans, about all the rabbinic prohibitions and injunctions. So why was Hashem kafal and har kegigis? Why did Hashem hold the mountain over our heads? Is it a sense to kind of force us into saying, okay, we give in, we'll even accept the rabbinic teachings. So that's what he's saying. HaKadosh Baruch Hu kafal and har kegigis lekabel Torah shebal peh, because Hashem wanted us to accept not just the written law, but all the oral law as well. When we said Na'aseh v'nishma, we already accepted the written Torah. So why did Hashem compel us to receive, by holding the mountain over our heads, that we should say that we also want to agree to have the rabbinic Torah, all the rabbinic traditions? Nimsa. So it comes out. So it comes down to when the Megillah tells us at the end of the Megillah, it says that we were so overjoyed after the Purim miracle, kimu v'kiblu. We reaffirmed what we had already accepted. What is that talking about? That even though we had already accepted the Torah, since we were somewhat compelled to do that, since God was holding the mountain over our heads, so on Purim, we reaccepted it out of love. But what does that mean we reaccepted on Purim? We already accepted when we said Na'aseh v'nishma totally willingly, the written Torah, Torah shebechsav. So what did we reaccept on Purim when we accepted with love? That which we were forced, that we were compelled to accept earlier. But what were we compelled to accept earlier? Not the written Torah, but rather the Torah shebal peh, the oral traditions, all the rabbinic ordinances. So all the rabbinic ordinances which we were compelled to accept at Sinai, that's what we came later after the Purim story to lovingly accept on ourselves and to willingly reaffirm. That's kimu v'kiblu. That's what we willingly reaffirmed what we had already accepted. We took on ourselves all the Torah, Shebal Peh, and all the rabbinic teachings. Ratzol Omar, what does that mean? Shekiblu Torah Shebal Peh miritzonim, that we willingly accepted that. Okay. B'hinei, and behold, b'midrash Isa, there's another medrash out there that teaches Shamalachim, that at the time of the giving of the Torah, we learned about this a couple of months ago. At the time of the giving of the Torah, I believe in Parshas Vayera, at the time that God gave us the Torah, Shamalachim isnagdu, the angels up in heaven complained, Shelo yiten HaKadosh Baruch Hu Torah Yisrael. The angels said, God, why are you giving the Torah to the Jews? Mipnei she'avru al Torah. And God says, what are they going to do? They're going to break the Torah. So God says to the angels that you don't deserve it. Why? Because you broke the Torah. The angels, when they descended to give Avram and Sarah the news that they were going to have a baby boy, it says that Avram fed them. He said them, Chema v'chalav. He gave them, he prepared for them the animals that he slaughtered, but he also gave them milk and he gave them butter. Kishiardu etzel Avram Avinu. Okay, mitzvah zu, the basar b'chalav. So it comes out that because of this mitzvah that's in the Torah of basar b'chalav, the prohibition that we're not supposed to mix meat and milk, zachinu l'kabbalas Torah. That's why we were zocha. That's why we merited to receive the Torah. So Rabbi Cohen says there's another medrash. You'll see how he weaves them together. So he says there's a couple of things we have to bear in mind. Number one, there's this idea out there that on Purim we reaccepted that which we had accepted in a compelled fashion at Sinai. What did we accept at a compelled fashion at Sinai? We accepted in a compelled fashion all the rabbinic ordinances, Torah Shebal Peh, but we lovingly already accepted the Midioraisa, all the Torah ordinances. So that's number one. So on Purim, what did we reaccept? We reaccepted Torah Shebal Peh. There's another medrash that at the time of the giving of the Torah, the Malachim, the angels up in heaven, complained, we want the Torah. And God says, no, you lost out. You had your opportunity. You went down to earth. And what did you do? You ate basar b'chalav. You ate milk and meat together. So now let's see. If you look at the pasuk, what exactly does the Torah prohibit when it comes to milk and meat? It says, Lo savashel gedi b'chalev imo. You're not allowed to eat a gedi, which is either a goat or a sheep, b'chalev imo, specifically with its mother's milk. So if on a strict Torah level, if you were, let's say, a Tzeduki or, the Sadducees or you're one of Shomronim who are reading a literal reading of the Torah, the only thing which the Torah prohibits would be cooking, Savashel Gedi, a kid. So that could be either a goat or a young sheep, with its mother's milk. Elisha Masora Pirsha, but we have a Masora, we have a Torah Shabbal Peh that says it's wider than that, it's broader than that, the prohibition. The Ratzalomer, what does it mean? Lo sochlu basar b'chalav. We're not allowed to eat any milk and meat products mixed together. So it comes out that the strength of Torah Shabbal Peh, our oral traditions, it's revealed in this. When we hold back from mixing together any mixtures of milk and meat, what we're really doing is affirming our commitment to Torah Shabbal Peh, because a plain literal reading of the Torah would take you that you're just not allowed to put a young goat milk together with its mother's milk. Anytime I'm refraining from having a cheeseburger, anytime that I'm refraining from whatever mixture of milk and meat, I am affirming my commitment to Torah Shabbal Peh, which says it's more expansive. The prohibition, the biblical prohibition, is more broad than just chalev imo with its mother's milk. Ubifrat, and specifically, when I even go a step further, that I'm going to be so careful on that which the sages prohibited. Together, the sages said as a protective fence, not only is beef products shouldn't be mixed with dairy, but even poultry. On a Torah level, having poultry and dairy is not a problem. It was the rabbis, it was on a rabbinic level that they said we should not do that. So if I really want to reaffirm my commitment to Torah Shabbal Peh, what do? I abstain from having poultry and milk, and that is showing even a more across. So it's one level to say I'm not going to have regular beef and regular milk, because that's beyond what the Torah, literal reading of the Torah says. But it's even a greater affirmation of my commitment to Torah Shabbal Peh when I refrain from having poultry and milk. And with this minhag on Purim once existed of having poultry in almond milk, and then showing the world that it's not dairy. I'm putting almonds out. When I take that step of putting slivered almonds in it, when I take that step of putting almonds on the tables, I'm broadcasting, I'm putting up a billboard that says, everybody, look what I am doing. I am having poultry, I'm having chicken, and it's not dairy, it's not real milk. This is just almond milk. And to prove it, I got slivered almonds. I got almonds on the table. It's not real dairy. Marin bazeh, what am I broadcasting? What am I announcing? The basar of b'chalav asar, that we are not supposed to eat milk together with poultry. Why am I going out of my way to show you it's almond milk and not real milk? Because I'm broadcasting that we're not supposed to have poultry and milk. So that's the ultimate billboard, the ultimate commitment to Torah Shabbal Peh. When was such a minhag put into place? V'davka b'Purim, specifically on Purim. Shuzman Kabbalah Satorah. Purim is the time where we reaffirmed our commitment to the Torah, and not just Torah Shabbat, but Torah Shabbal Peh. All of our oral traditions, which gave a more expansive definition of Lo Savashel Gedi B'chalev Imo. It said it's not limited to a young kid and its own mother's milk. All beef and all dairy is prohibited. And then the rabbis took it a step further to mean poultry and dairy is prohibited. So now on Purim, what greater day is there to show such a commitment to Torah Shabbal Peh than on the day of Kimu v'Kiblu, on the day that we reaffirmed our commitment to Torah Shabbal Peh. There's no greater day in the Jewish calendar to show how committed we are to abstaining, to not having milk and meat together. And now even taking it to the next level of not just milk and meat, but even poultry and milk. That's why we merited having the Torah, because God was able to say to the malachim, to the angels, you don't get the Torah because you blew it. You had milk and meat. The Jews, they deserve it. Ubepurim shekibalnu Torah sheba'al peh miratzon. And on Purim, which is the day that we accepted Torah sheba'al peh, all of our oral traditions, miratzon, full willingly, marim zihirus b'Torah sheba'al peh shal basar b'chalav. He says, what are we doing? What a beautiful minhag. This was a way of reaffirming our commitment. This is the ultimate kimu v'kiblu. This is the way of showing our commitment to the Torah by saying that not just are we going to be makbid and not having meat and milk together, but we're going to show that it's beyond the literal reading about a young kid and its own mother's milk, but all milk, all dairy, but even poultry and dairy, to show our commitment to Torah Sheba'al Peh and to rabbinic Judaism. And I'm displaying this by having the almonds out there to show how makbid I am. What a beautiful minhag, and what an appropriate day for this to happen. That last line, v'nimsa, so it comes out, shema she'anu marim sheshomim l'takonas chazal. By putting out those almonds, we are making a declaration that we are makbid, we are scrupulous, and to keep keeping to all of the decrees of chazal that were set up as protective measures. Nami ave b'chlal ha'kabbalah shel Torah Sheba'al Peh. That's part and parcel of our willing and loving acceptance of Torah Sheba'al Peh. So I thought this was so interesting. I thought this was beautiful what Rabbi Cohen did here. Rabbi Cohen just gave a beautiful explanation to this minhag. This wasn't just, okay, a bunch of Jews in the ghetto and nothing else around, so they had some chicken and almond milk, shkoach. No, he's saying our ancestors don't start minhagim that way. That might happen 1 year out of desperation, but that's not how you have a beautiful minhag that the Marshal and the Shach are talking about, and using that as a basis to argue with the Ramah and the Shulchan Aruch. That's not how such a minhag develops. If a minhag like that develops, it must be firmly rooted in Jewish tradition. There must be some serious messaging behind it. And Rabbi Cohen says, here's my theory. I love it. I think it's such a beautiful idea. I was so excited to see it. And what made it even more exciting is learning something that Rabbi Cohen shared with us that could enhance our Purim, our appreciation of Minhagei Yisrael, especially at a time like this when he needs a refuah shalema. And in his sefer, he named after his mother, Esther Amalka. And this should be a refuah shalema for David ben Esther Malka. What an incredible confluence of all this. I thought this was incredibly cool. And again, I'm going to put in a request with Layla. She's in the kitchen now. I'm going to put in a request. She already has a menu planned for Friday morning, what we're having for Suda for Purim. So we're not going to have this, but maybe we'll have it Friday night, or maybe we'll have it Shabbos day, Shushan Purim. We'll be Mekayim. We will fulfill this ancient minhag Yisrael. It was a Polish minhag. So you can explain, anyone who doesn't have Polish background in their family, maybe that's why they've never heard of this before. But anyone who's got proud Polish genes in themselves, we can reaffirm this once a popular minhag, having some poultry product, have some chicken made with almond milk, and specifically put almonds in that milk as a way of affirming how makbid we are on keeping takanas, all the decrees of Chazal, and we will reinvigorate this once popular minhag Yisrael. And now, thanks to Rav David Cohen, we have an understanding to this beautiful minhag. I thought this was just so interesting. Okay. All right, let's move on to another Dvar Torah. But Leila, that's my request. I'm putting I found it. Online, some recipes. Maybe for Shushan Purim, Shabbos, we'll have a Shushan Purim Suda. That'll be it. Okay. Here we go. All right, I want to share another Dvar Torah with you, which is I thought was fascinating. I found this last week, and I shared part of this with the shul on Shabbos. So anyone who was there may have heard part of this, or your husband, if he was there, may have brought it home. But there's more to it, and I want to share it with you now. There is something, this totally is going to change our appreciation of part of the Megillah story. Perek Beis, the second chapter in Megillas Esther, we're told that Esther Amalka she becomes the Malka. We're told that Esther wins those beauty pageants, and she is brought to the palace of the king. It's just, there's steps. It doesn't happen overnight. There's steps. She first wins the local contest. She gets shipped off to the capital. There's more contests. And every step of the way, she's finding favor in the eyes of everyone whose job it is to look after her. And with all this, she's under strict orders from Mordechai not to reveal her identity, her background, her national origins, because Mordechai sees there's more going on here than what meets the eye. So let's take a look at two psukim in Perek Beis, the second chapter of Esther. So let's see. Perek Beis, pasuk ches. Vayibi shama dvar hamelech v'daso, and it came to pass when the king's order and his decree were heard, ubi kabetz naros rabos al Shushan abira al yad hagai. and they brought together many maidens, many young women who had, I guess, won the local beauty pageants, and they were all shipped off to Shushan. They were brought to the capital city of Shushan, and they were in the custody, they were under the stewardship of a fellow by the name of Hagai. Hagai was the one in charge of, I guess it may have been this harem or this dormitory, you might say, where all of the beauties had been sent before they would have their audition before the king. So they were all sent to Hagai. He was looking after them to get them ready. So Esther was taken to the Beis HaMelech, to the palace compound. She's in the custody. She's under the stewardship, watch of Hagai, whose job was Shomer Anashim. He was the one who was in charge of all of the women that were brought in. Test 9. So Esther found favor in his eyes. She pleased him. And she just had this amazing grace to her that he found that he just says, I want to do whatever I can to help you. So he hastened. He said, I'm going to get you everything you need to look your best. All your cosmetics, all your ointments, everything. Everything she needed. Whatever Esther needed, Hagai says, I'm going out of my way to help you. I'm going to rush it to you. And he also assigned to her 7 maidens looking after her. Again, in an age before electricity, there was so many chores that needed to happen in order to get through the course of the day. He assigned 7 maidens to be in charge and looking after Esther. Anything she needs, they'll take care of her. And the last part of Pasuk I've bolded. So translated as here as, and he changed her and her maidens to the best portions in the house of the women, which basically means, Vayishaneha, meaning he made a shinoi, he made a switch. He did something to treat Esther and her maidens better than any of the other women in this harem, in this dormitory. So the question is, what was that switch? What did he do? So the Gemara gives 3 opinions. I want to focus on one. The Gemara in Megillah, it's on Yud Gimel 13a. The Gemara says, what does it mean, Vayishaneha v'esnaraseha? Now, what does it mean that he made some kind of switch for her and her maidens to give her something better than everyone else? I'm just taking a quick drink. The Gemara says, Amar Rav taught, She'echila machal Yehudi. He gave her Jewish food. He gave her kosher food. That was the switch that he made for Esther. He gave her Jewish food, gave her good kosher food. Everyone else could have been eating whatever their Persian delicacies were. And what did Esther get? She got the Meal Mart dinners. That's what she got. It's like you're on the plane and everyone is getting lobster. And what do they bring you? They bring you out that Meal Mart, turkey sandwich or something. So that's basically, but it was better than what everyone else got. That's what Esther got. She got Machal Yehudi. I want to share with you, there is $1 million question on this. And it was asked by one of the great Sephardic rabbis. He's known as Rav Yosef Chaim. That was his name, was Rav Yosef Chaim. There's a picture of him, and there is his bio. He was 1835 to 1909. He was known as Rav Yosef Chaim mi Baghdad because he lived in Baghdad. It's so hard to imagine. The last place we think of as being a thriving center of Jewish culture and scholarship is Baghdad, Iraq. But for centuries it was. Remember, that's Bavel. Talmud Bavli was composed in Iraq, modern day Iraq. And Babylonian Jews, that's what they like to call, they don't like to call themselves Iraqi Jews because Iraq has such bad relationships with America, with Israel. I know in Great Neck, New York, there's a community, they call themselves Babylonian Jews. Same way Iranian Jews don't like to be called Iranian, they be called Persian Jews because there's all sorts of bad connotations, modern day Iran, modern day Iraq. So the Babylonian Jewish community thrived for centuries. And really, until the 20th century, it came to an end with the founding of the state of Israel when they pretty much expelled everyone and the Jews got out of there. It wasn't safe for them to be there anymore. But until the 20th century, there was a thriving Jewish community in Baghdad. And one of its last rabbinic luminaries was this Rav Yosef Chaim of Baghdad. He's very well known for a halachic work he wrote called the Ben Ish Chai. In the Sephardic world, it's very closely studied, the Ben Ish Chai. You always hear that quoted. And he also wrote on the Gemara, on the Agadata, on the more homiletic sections of the Gemara, he wrote a sefer called Ben Yehoyada. Ben Yehoyada was the name of that. So I'm going to share with you an amazing piece from the Ben Yehoyada on this Maseches Megillah here. That again, what did the Gemara say? That according to Rav, what did Hagai do different for Esther? He gave her Jewish food. He gave her kosher food. So Rav Yosef Chaim asks, he's going to ask a question, give two answers. We're going to focus on both of them. They're both fascinating. So Rav Yosef Chaim asks as follows. Let's read it inside. We have time. It says, She'achila machal Yehudi, that Hagai gave Esther Jewish food. Kasha, he says, this is really difficult to understand. Esther was under strict orders from Mordechai not to divulge what her identity is, not to give up what's her national origin, what's her background, where was she born, what nation does she belong to. No one knows yet that she's Jewish. So why on earth is Hagai giving her Jewish food, which means kosher food? What? Esther's not allowed to tell anyone. She's following strict orders from Mordechai not to give up her identity. So she hasn't given up her identity, and that's crucial for the whole story. So how does Hagai know that she's Jewish to start giving her kosher food? That's the Ben Ishai's question. That's the Ben Yoyada. That's his excellent question. So he's going to give us two answers. The first answer is going to transform the way you understand the Purim story, as it did for me. But it makes a lot of sense. Let's use first answer, and the second answer is fascinating too. First answer, V'nira li. It seems to me, how do we answer this question? Everybody knew she grew up in the house of Mordechai. That was no secret. That's where she was snatched from. When they were roping in girls from all over the empire, she was hiding, whatever, and everyone knows that she was snatched from Mordechai's house. There was no question about that. However, Amru, what did everyone say about her? She asufis min ashuk. She was a foundling. She was a little orphan girl that was just brought in from the marketplace. Shalakha katana. She was brought into the house when she was just a little kid. Nobody knows what nation she's from. So basically, everyone assumes, yes, we got her from Mordechai's house, but Mordechai was running an orphanage. Mordechai was a really kind person. And he had foundlings. He had all sorts of kids in his house. He had kids who weren't Jewish. He had kids from Asian descents. He had kids from African descents. It's like amazing. You call people a Persian African or a Persian Asian. I don't know what you would call it. We're used to the terms American Asian, American African, African American. So I don't know, whatever term you would use. So Mordechai had kids in his house from all ethnic.
Rabbi?
Yes.
I have a question. How do we know that?
Let's see. Let's first speak him out. So what he's saying is that they obviously knew that she came from Mordechai's house because that's where she was apprehended from. But just because she's from Mordechai's house, that doesn't necessarily spill the beans and mean that she's Jewish, because someone could make the case that shkoach, she came from Mordechai's house, but who says that she's Jewish? Maybe Mordechai had all sorts of kids that he was raising. Maybe he had this little orphanage there. Who knows that? Why does that mean that she was Jewish? So it says, I lost the place. Achamru sheyasufis min ashuk. That people could say she was a foundling. Shalacha katana v'lo nada me'eza umahi. She was brought in as a little kid. No one knew what her background was. Al kainhim matzah. Therefore, she found for herself pischon peh. She found a way how she could ask for kosher food without giving away her identity. Lomar lo. She said to Hagai, "Sheya achila machal yudi. Please, I request Jewish food." She explains about herself. I was an orphan kid. I was taken in as a youngster. I was raised in Mordechai's house, and everyone knows Mordechai's a Jew. So all I was ever fed, I never had shrimp. I never had lobster. I never had cheeseburgers. I was raised on a Jewish cuisine. And if you change my menu, if you change my routine of what I normally eat, lo ya'aravla, it won't sit well with my disposition, the tachish yofya, and it's going to ruin my beauty. So she's saying as follows. The first answer of the Ben Ish Chai is, how did Hagai know that she was Jewish to give her kosher food? And don't tell me Esther told her and spilled the beans. Esther was under strict orders not to tell anyone she was Jewish. Esther was under strict orders not to give away her identity. So how's according to Rab, how's Hagai giving her meal mart meals? How does that make sense? So the first answer to Ben Yoyad is as follows, is that she had a great alibi. Esther could say, everyone knows I was taken from Mordechai's house. That's no secret, but I could explain. She's saying, Esther could have said about herself, I'm a foundling. He took me in. Mordechai is such a kind-hearted man. I grew up in that orphanage there that he runs. There were other kids there too, from African backgrounds, from Asian backgrounds. They had some kid all the way from New Jersey, but they had these kids in there from these faraway places who clearly weren't Persian. And I'm one of them. And I'm not Jewish. I don't even know what my background is because I was taken in as a little kid. I don't know my identity. But what I do know is I was raised on potato kugel and knishes and all that stuff that Meal Mart makes. I was raised eating roast beef. I had pastrami. I never ate shrimp. I never ate lobster. I never ate ham. That stuff is going to kill me. My system just isn't used to that. So, and I'm here and hey guy, you want to see what's best for me? You're getting me my cosmetics. You're getting me everything. So get me the type of food that my system is used to, that my body is used to. And that way that'll promote that I'll remain healthy and I'll remain beautiful. That's his first answer to this. Abby, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess.
So
Sort of. I'll go with it.
So that's his first answer. That's his theory. In other words, he says, look at the facts. The facts on the ground are that he's according to Rav, he's got a reason to give her kosher food, but at the same token, she has not revealed or identified. How can you make that all jive? How do you make that all fit together? So he's saying, here's the theory, is that this is what Esther explained it. This is how Esther explained it. Now, this changes so much about the Megillah for us. And I want to tell you something, is that this makes a lot of sense. I never thought about this before, is that how is there no report where she came from? Everyone who snatched girls and was roping them in, like you have like all the girl catchers who were out there grabbing anyone who looked beautiful, they all wrote down a report where the girl came from. You don't think there was an address? She didn't have a name tag with an address there? Okay, so they all knew she came from Mordechai's house. How does that mean she's not Jewish? So she could be, this is how she was always explaining herself, is I'm an orphan girl, which isn't a lie. I was taken in by this guy Mordechai, but that doesn't necessarily mean she's Jewish. Also, furthermore, the Megillah goes on to say that after she was taken to the Beis HaMelech, what did Mordechai do every day? He walked around in the Chatzar HaMelech. He walked around and he wanted to ladas a Shalom Esther. He was always looking after her, wanting to know, asking messengers, how's she doing? How's she doing? Isn't that going to raise some eyebrows? Who is this guy, this Jew in the courtyard who keeps asking about that Esther? Why does he keep asking? So he could always, he's also got the same excuse. I run an orphanage and I took her in. She's not Jewish. She's not my kid, but I'm concerned. I'm just like I'm concerned about the Persian African kids. I'm concerned about the Persian Asian kids. I'm concerned about that kid all the way from Jersey, but I'm also concerned about her, how she's doing. This in a sense, this could make some other parts of the Megillah fit nicely together. It answered a question I had, by the way, because a little bit later in the Megillah, in the same parak in the Megillah, what does it say? That she wouldn't tell anyone what her background was. She wouldn't tell anyone what her origins was. But then as soon as Mordechai hears about the plot, about the assassination attempt on the king, what does she do? She tells it over to the king, B'Shem Mordechai, in the name of Mordechai. Well, isn't that going to give away that you got a connection with Mordechai? That's really what got me started on this in the first place. And I didn't know, I couldn't find an answer. But then someone in Atlanta suggested I look at this different question will answer my question. My question was, why would she by telling it over the assassination attempt in the name of Mordechai, isn't that going to give away her identity? So the Ben Yoyada would say, no, the same way saying I want Meal Mart food didn't give away her identity. She could say, yeah, Mordechai and I do have a connection. Mordechai is the guy who took me in. He ran the orphanage. So the same way. So I'm telling you, Achashverosh, this assassination attempt over in his name. But nowhere does that mean that gave away her Jewish identity. So that was how I got referred to this Ben Yoyada. Let's take a look at his second answer. His second answer is fascinating. The second answer I've got here in the asterisk is about 8 lines up. The second word on the line, Oyuvan. There's another way to understand this. Again, he wants to understand, according to Rav. Rav said, what did it mean that Hagai gave her something different than the rest of the harem? He gave her kosher food. But doesn't that give away her identity? Why was she asking for kosher food if she's not Jewish? So look what he says. Oh, Yuvan, or he could explain it this way. That he gave her Jewish food, Retzalomar, what does that mean? He gave her meat, the only meat he ever brought to her, she probably had her own kitchen, the only meat he ever brought her was meat that had been shechted properly. But why? Why is she asking for shechted meat? Because she explained it as follows. This is better for the body. This is healthier. What do you know about kosher meat? Kosher meat had to be inspected. They're going to inspect it to make sure it wasn't treif. It had no holes in the kidneys. It had no holes in the lungs and all that stuff. Shem nasim al yidei cholaim. Why would it have had those treifios? Because it was a sick animal. So she was saying, I want to live a healthier lifestyle. If I want to live a healthier lifestyle, I want kosher meat. Remember that old slogan for Hebrew National? They answer to a higher authority, and they use that as a slogan to sell tons of Hebrew National to non-Jews for decades. Why? Because they said, kosher, if it's kosher meat, it's got extra levels of inspection. It's healthier for you. So that's what she was doing. V'arata, look what he says. V'arata, even to this day, he's writing this at the late 1800s. Yesh be'erupa, there is in Europe, anashim she'enam Yisrael, people who are not Jewish. And they insist on going into Jewish butcher shops to get kosher meat. And why do they do that? Because they think it's healthier. And I remember hearing this in the news. Every time there's a massive recall, whether it's mad cow disease or something like that, kosher meat flies off the shelf. Why? Not just because, okay, it's harder to find non-kosher meat. Okay, there's tons of non-kosher meat providers in the country. But because people get so sick of this, and they say, okay, I'm going kosher because it'll be an extra level of supervision. I won't have to deal with this. Okay, it doesn't last usually too long because the difference in the prices usually brings them back to treif. But whenever something like that happens, it becomes hard to find kosher meat. Look what he says at the end. V'omrim, and they say, Shegam hamalchasa shel Angliz yarum hoda. Even the queen of the English, may God elevate her. Eino chelas elarak basar kosher. She only eats kosher meat. Shechatzum min hachacham shu kosher. That a rabbi gives a seal on it that it's kosher. It's got a big OU on it, a star K, whatever it is. She'll only eat that. I tried Googling this. Now, again, the Ben Ish Chai is living in the end of the 1800s in Baghdad, in Iraq. It's not like communication is what it is nowadays. There probably was a rumor going around. There was like, around the water cooler, there was some urban legend that the royal family in England only ate kosher meat. I tried Googling it to see, did such a rumor ever exist? I couldn't find anything. But again, the internet doesn't tell you what was happening on the Baghdadi streets of the Jewish community in the late 1800s. So it seems like there once was an urban legend out there that the royal family only ate kosher meat, and he says that would inspire it too. I want to tell you, I thought this was fascinating, and it's something that's still, it's over 100 years later, and it's still true. Kosher food, we have to thank the fact that there are so many non-Jews out there who want kosher food. That's the reason why kosher food is affordable. We are such a small percentage of America. The Jews in general are small, but then the kosher observing Jews, strictly kosher observing Jews, we are a fraction of the American population. Yet you go into supermarkets and there's so much kosher food. There was a book, I don't have it anymore. I must have lent it to someone and never got it back. It was called Kosher Nation. It was by Sue Fishhoff, Kosher Nation. Fascinating book. Order it on Amazon if you want. Fascinating book. And this is what bothered Sue. Sue wants to know, why is there so much kosher food? It is an exploding industry. But the observant Jews who strictly keep kosher are a minuscule of a fraction of America. How do you explain this? And she goes on to explain. She does her research and she finds that it's true. We are a fraction of the people keeping kosher. The massive majority of people looking for a hechsher are not Jews, and they're not Orthodox Jews for sure. For various other reasons, they want to buy kosher food. And it's because of that massive number of people who want to buy kosher food, that's why we, who have to buy kosher food, find it in such an abundant volume and at affordable prices. Here's a brief article I found on the BBC. So this is out of England. So if I couldn't find anything about the English family in the 1800s eating kosher meat, at least I did find something in the BBC about kosher. Look at this. This was the BBC was reporting on Kosher Fest. Kosher Fest is an annual trade show that takes place in New Jersey where they show all sorts of different kosher products. So I just took a couple paragraphs. It's fascinating. Let's share this together.
I had a neighbor in Scranton who always ordered kosher chicken. And I asked why, because the feed that they give the chicken, so they know that the kosher chicken.
People will say it's healthier, 100%. They say, I want to have the kosher, 100%. Let's see this article. It's called "Why is Kosher Food Soaring in Popularity?" Just over a year ago. It could have been any gourmet food fair with lots of delicious things to eat. The main hall at the Meadowlands Exposition Center in New Jersey was bustling with more than 6,000 attendees, taking a look at 360 food and drink exhibitors from around the world. But this was no ordinary food and drink exhibition. For while there was a vast range on display, everything had one major thing in common. They were all certified kosher. Everything present conformed to kashrut, the Jewish dietary laws. The event at the end of last year was the 31st annual Kosher Fest, a 2-day gathering that touts itself as the world's largest and most attended kosher certified products trade show. The center of the world's kosher food sector is the US. For while only 2% of Americans are Jewish, and by the way, of that 2%, how many do you think are Orthodox and only keeping kosher? Tiny. So for only 2% of Americans are Jewish, some 7.5 million people. A study by the Quartz Business News website found that 41% of all packaged food, that's crazy, 41% of all packaged food in the US is kosher, certified kosher. Do you understand that? 2% of the population, but 41% of all certified, of all packaged food has got a kosher certification. Explanations for this include a perception that kosher food is cleaner or healthier, or people's desire for assurance that a product does not include potential allergens, such as shellfish. It offers certainty for vegans, such as example of Oreo's cookies, which prior to their switch to kosher in the late 90s contained lard, which is pork fat. Also, let's say someone's got a dairy allergy. Led by growing demand in the US, the global kosher food market is predicted to increase to almost $60 billion of annual sales in 2025, up from $24 billion in 2017. Do you understand? That's 8 years and it's almost triple. That's crazy. Given those vast figures, it's not surprising that a growing number of food businesses around the globe are seeking kosher accreditation. I think firms are coming from the basis that you can't produce an ingredient anywhere in the world and hope to sell it in the US without being kosher, says Mr. Lubinsky. That's the guy who runs the Kosher Fest. There's a significant market and firms want a piece of it. I can affirm this because I give a hechsher once a year. In the summer, I go to a plant not far from here that makes zinc oxide. It's a powder, zinc oxide, but they want a letter from an Orthodox rabbi certifying that it's kosher. So I got in touch with the Chaf-K in New Jersey. I got a relationship with them because I go to an ice cream plant for them once a month. I got in touch. I said, what do I need to do? And they basically said, zinc oxide does not need to be certified. It's kosher. Go in the plant. Just make sure that they are only producing zinc oxide there. That is, in fact, all that they're producing. And just certify that and write him this letter. He gave me the text of what to do, and that's it. So all I'm certifying is that, yes, this plant is only producing zinc oxide. Zinc oxide it looks like talcum powder when it's all done. That's what this stuff is. But I said, well, why do they want a kosher letter? I just don't get it. And they said, you don't understand. Even though zinc oxide is usually in medicinal products, there are some small amounts of it that do end up in some edible items. And if you want, there are companies out there, let's say they're dealing with Procter & Gamble. That's the guys, I think, who make Pringles. Let's say Pringles. In every jar of Pringles, there's hundreds of ingredients. I don't know, hundreds. There's probably 100 ingredients in a can of Pringles. And one of them, in some of theirs, might be a minuscule amount of zinc oxide. Procter & Gamble does not want to have to deal with anything complex. So they say, we are only accepting ingredients from vendors if they're kosher certified. That way we don't ever have to worry that we have to recall a product because something got in there that wasn't kosher. So therefore they'll say, to keep it simple, every ingredient coming in has to be kosher certified. So if there's going to be a minuscule amount of zinc oxide that might end up in a can of Pringles, they want to make sure it's kosher certified. So therefore they want once a year that rabbi to come down, Orthodox rabbi, and write them a letter that it's kosher certified. Why? What am I certifying? That all they're doing in this plant is burning zinc to make zinc oxide. That's all they're doing there. They're not doing anything else. They're not making anything else. So that's what it is. So this plays itself out. It's absolutely wild. And this is the reality today. And we have to thank the fact that there are so many people, whether they're Muslims, whether they're people who think it's cleaner, healthier, whatever it is, allergens, whatever it is, because there are so many people who are demanding kosher food, that's why we're able to find it in such abundance and at affordable prices. But it's absolutely wild. That means we're 2% of the American population. That's American Jews, not the kosher observant Jews, but just American Jews. And 41% of packaged goods being sold and marketed in America are kosher. That means there are far more Americans looking for that OU on the container than there are Jews. That's wild. Absolutely wild. But we have to.
Thank you, Rabbi. I gotta leave.
Okay, you got it. I want to thank everyone.
I have to get my shot today, my second shot.
Please go. Yeah, please get your shot. I think
today I have to go.